The scream is the first thing that truly breaks the silence. Not the shuffling of papers, not the lawyer's dry cough, not the condescending sigh from my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband. No, the first real sound in this sterile, glass-walled conference room is a raw, guttural scream of pure, unadulterated humiliation. It comes from Liam, and it's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. His face, usually so composed, so smugly handsome, is a twisted mask of disbelief. His eyes are fixed on the massive screen at the end of the table, where a single PowerPoint slide is projected in high definition. It's a welcome to the Elysian family email. Simple, clean, elegant branding. My branding. But it's not the welcome message that has ripped this sound from his throat. It's the two photos displayed side by side beneath the text. Your journey with us, before and after. The after photo is of the woman sitting next to him, Amber, his new, vibrant, youthful obsession. She looks flawless, glowing. The woman he left me for. The before photo, however, that one is also her. Same face, same person, but stripped of the magic. It shows the fine lines around her eyes, the faint sunspots on her cheeks, the tired, dull quality of skin that hasn't yet been touched by my life's work. It's the raw data, the unedited truth. Amber's perfectly manicured hand flies to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that mirrors his.
She's not looking at him, though. She's looking at me.
And for the first time in months, I don't feel invisible. I feel powerful. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my water, the ice clinking gently against the glass. The sound is an earthquake in the ringing silence that follows his scream. He tried to ruin me by calling me old. He didn't realize I was the one who owned the fountain of youth. The silence that followed that scream was louder than any explosion. If you've ever known a silence like that, a silence so full of unspoken things that it feels heavy enough to crush you, tell me about it in the comments. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me bring these moments to life. Just 6 months ago, my world wasn't a silent, sterile conference room. It was the chaotic, beautiful mess of my lab. The air smelled of ozone from the centrifuges and the faint, clean scent of the base emollients we used in our formulations. My life was a symphony of beeping timers, the low hum of refrigeration units, and the excited chatter of my team as we chased breakthroughs in cellular regeneration. I am a biochemist. More than that, I am the founder of Elysian Skincare. I don't sell hope in a jar, I sell science. I decode the language of aging and teach cells to remember their youth. My hands, though meticulously clean, were rarely manicured. They were stained with indicator dyes, calloused from long hours pipetting, and usually decorated with a smear of whatever test batch we were working on. I lived in lab coats and comfortable shoes. My hair was perpetually tied back in a messy bun, not as a fashion statement, but as a practical necessity. I was 42, and I was building an empire molecule by molecule. And Liam was supposed to be my partner in that. We met in college. He was the charismatic business major who could sell ice in a blizzard. I was the quiet science nerd who could tell you the molecular structure of that ice. We were a perfect pair. He championed my ambition. When I wanted to leave a stable research position to start Elysian, he was the one who said, "Do it. You're the smartest person I know." He helped me write the business plan, his financial acumen the perfect complement to my scientific vision. He was my rock, my cheerleader, my home. For 20 years, he was my everything. Our house was a testament to our shared journey. My overflowing bookshelves of scientific journals bled into his collection of first edition novels. His sleek, modern espresso machine sat on the counter next to my battered old Chemex that I used for late-night lab sessions. We had a rhythm, a comfortable, worn-in love that I thought was unbreakable. I believed we were a team, building a future where my science would change the world and we would grow old together, watching it happen. But the symphony of my life had started to sound off. A few discordant notes I tried to ignore. It began subtly. Liam, who had always loved our quiet nights in, started needing more social time, dinners with clients that stretched late into the night. Weekend golf trips that became more and more frequent. He joined a high-end gym, the kind with eucalyptus-scented towels and a juice bar that cost more than my lunch. He started spending hours there every day. His body, once familiar and soft, became hard, sculpted, and somehow alien. His closet began to change, too. The comfortable sweaters and worn-in jeans were replaced by slim-fit shirts and designer labels I'd never heard of. He started using new cologne, a sharp, aggressive scent that clung to his clothes and felt like a stranger in our bed. He was curating a new version of himself, and I didn't seem to be part of the design. The distance wasn't just physical. It was in the silence that grew between us. Dinners became quiet affairs, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone. I'd talk about a breakthrough in the lab, a new peptide sequence that was showing incredible results, and he'd just nod, his eyes still glued to the screen. "That's great, honey," he'd murmur, the words empty, automatic. The man who once listened with rapt attention, asking insightful questions about polymer chains and mitochondrial decay, was gone. In his place was a polite, handsome stranger who shared my mortgage. I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested weekends away, date nights at our old favorite restaurants. He was always too busy, too tired, too stressed from work. I told myself it was just a phase. He was approaching 50. Maybe it was a midlife crisis. I gave him space. I focused on my work, pouring all my energy and love into Elysian, believing that our foundation was strong enough to weather the storm. I believed in the history we had built, the 2 decades of love and partnership. I was a scientist. I believed in evidence. And the evidence of our life together was all around me. It had to count for something. It had to be stronger than this strange, cold tide that was pulling him away. I was wrong. The evidence I was clinging to was from a closed case. The trial was over, and I hadn't even realized it had begun. The end didn't come with a dramatic confrontation. There was no slammed door, no tearful confession. It was worse. It was quiet, clinical, and delivered with the casual cruelty of a man swatting a fly. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because we were supposed to be finalizing the Q3 projections for Elysian that night. I'd come home early, cooked his favorite meal, braised short ribs, the kind that take all day. I'd even opened a bottle of the good wine we'd been saving. I was making an effort, trying to pull us back to shore. He walked in an hour late, smelling of that new, sharp cologne and the cold night air. He didn't even notice the food. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosened his tie, and looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like months. There was no warmth in his gaze. It was analytical, appraising, like a judge looking at a piece of evidence. "Maya," he said, his voice flat. "We need to talk." My stomach turned to ice. Those 4 words are the death knell of every relationship. I tried to keep my voice light.
Okay, talk.
"I made dinner. Let's eat first." He shook his head, a small, impatient gesture.
No.
"Let's just do this." He walked over to the island and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his perfectly tailored shirt. He looked like he was about to fire an underperforming employee. "I'm not happy," he began. The classic, cowardly opening. I haven't been for a long time. I stood there, a dish towel in my hand, the rich smell of the dinner I'd so carefully prepared suddenly making me nauseous. "What are you talking about, Liam? What's wrong?" "It's us," he said, gesturing vaguely between the two of us. "We've grown apart. We want different things." "What different things?" My voice was shaking. "I want what we've always wanted. To build the company, to travel, to be together." He let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound I'd never heard from him before.
See?
That's the problem. You're still thinking about together. I'm thinking about life. About living it. I feel like my life is just starting, and you've gotten so comfortable. Comfortable. The word felt like a slap. I'm running a multi-million-dollar company, Liam. I work 70-hour weeks. That's not comfortable. "It's not about the company," he said, and then he delivered the blow. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my messy bun, my comfortable sweater, the faint stress lines around my eyes. It's you, Maya. You've let yourself go. The air left my lungs. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting beneath me. What? Look at you, he said, his voice laced with a pity that was 1,000 times worse than anger. You live in that lab. You don't take care of yourself anymore. We used to have so much fun, so much energy. I need that. I need someone vibrant. Vibrant. The word hung in the air, pulsing and ugly. I'm building our future, I whispered, the words feeling pathetic even as I said them. This company, it was for us. Was it, he countered, his voice turning sharp. Or was it for you? So you could hide behind your beakers and formulas and not have to deal with the real world. He pushed off the counter and started pacing like a caged animal. I go to these corporate events, these parties, and I see men my age with their wives, women who take care of themselves, who look amazing. And then I look at you. He stopped and looked at me again. And then he said the words that would be seared into my brain forever.
I'm 48, Maya.
I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm at the peak of my career. And you're getting older. It's just a mismatch. I feel like I'm moving forward, and you're just standing still. Maybe even moving backward. He took a breath and delivered the final, fatal sentence. I think I need some space. I'm going to move out for a while. To think. But he wasn't going to think. We both knew it. He was leaving. He was leaving me because he thought I was too old. My husband of 20 years, the man who held my hand when my first major experiment failed, who celebrated with cheap champagne when we secured our first round of funding, was discarding me like an outdated piece of equipment. The irony was so thick, I could barely breathe. The woman who had dedicated her life to reversing the very concept of aging, was being told I had expired. The foundation I had built my life on didn't just have a crack in it. It had been dynamited. And I was left standing in the rubble, choking on the dust. The first few weeks were a blur of shame and disbelief. I'd wake up in our cold, empty bed, and the weight of his words would crash down on me all over again. You've let yourself go. You're getting older. A mismatch. I started avoiding mirrors. When I did catch my reflection, I no longer saw myself. I saw his assessment. I saw the tired eyes, the strands of gray I hadn't bothered to cover, the comfortable clothes that now felt like a uniform of failure. His voice became my inner monologue, a constant, cruel critic. I tried to function. I went to the lab, but my focus was shattered. I'd stare at complex chemical structures on the screen and see his face, his look of pity. My team, usually so energized by my presence, grew quiet and cautious around me. They knew something was wrong. My business partner and best friend, Chloe, tried to intervene. Chloe was my opposite in many ways. She was sharp, pragmatic, all clean lines and brutal honesty. She handled the business end of a lesion, leaving me to the science. She saw my collapse for what it was. You can't let him do this to you, Maya, she said one afternoon, storming into my office and shutting the door. I was just sitting there, staring out the window, a half-finished formula on my monitor. He's a fool. An insecure, aging narcissist who got a gym membership and thinks he's a new man. This isn't about you. Isn't it? I asked, my voice hoarse. He said I let myself go. Maybe he's right. When was the last time I bought a new dress? Or got my hair done? I've been so focused on the company. You've been building an empire, she shot back, her voice rising. Something he was supposed to be proud of. Don't you dare turn his pathetic midlife crisis into your failure. But I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was Liam. In a desperate, humiliating spiral, I decided to try and win him back. I would become the vibrant woman he wanted. I hired a personal trainer who pushed me through grueling workouts that left my muscles screaming. I booked an appointment at a trendy, expensive salon and had my hair cut and colored, sitting numbly as the stylist chattered about highlights and layers. I bought new clothes, tight dresses, and high heels that felt like a costume. I sent him a picture of myself, all dressed up before a charity gala I had to attend. I was hoping for a spark, a hint of the old Liam. His reply came hours later. A single, sterile text message. Looks nice. Hope you have a good time. It was like a pat on the head. Dismissive. Final. Each attempt to get his attention was met with a wall of polite indifference. He'd answer my calls, but his voice was distant. He was always in a meeting or about to step on a plane. He was weaning me off him, like a doctor tapering a patient off a drug. And the withdrawal was excruciating. I felt pathetic, chasing a man who had made it painfully clear he didn't want me. My self-respect was eroding with every unanswered text, every short, emotionless phone call. This wasn't me. I was a scientist, a leader, a creator. But he had reduced me to this. A cliché. The desperate, aging wife trying to cling to a man who was already gone. It was the deepest humiliation I had ever known, a slow, grinding destruction of the woman I thought I was. The whispers started about a month after he left. A friend of a friend saw him at a restaurant downtown, his arm draped around a much younger woman. Then another sighting at a gallery opening. They described her as a blonde bombshell, bubbly, full of life, vibrant. The word echoed in my head, a mockingbird call. Her name, I soon learned, was Amber. I made the mistake of looking her up online. Her social media was a curated highlight reel of a perfect life. Boating trips, rooftop cocktails, designer outfits, and a blindingly white smile in every photo. She was 28, a fitness influencer and part-time model. She was the physical embodiment of everything he had accused me of not being. Seeing her face felt like swallowing glass. It made it real. It wasn't just that he'd left me. He'd replaced me. Swiftly, and with a gleaming, upgraded model. Mutual friends stopped calling. Invitations to couples events dried up. I was a social pariah, the discarded wife. The world we had built together was now his, and I was on the outside looking in. Just as I was beginning to process the emotional devastation, the second wave of the attack began. It came in a crisp, white envelope delivered by a courier. It was from his lawyer. Liam wasn't just leaving me. He was coming for my company. The letter was a work of artful fiction. It claimed that since he had provided foundational emotional and financial support during Elysian's inception, he was entitled to 50% of the company. 50% of my life's work. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through a haze of rage and disbelief. Emotional support? He called my passion a hobby for years until it started making money. Financial support? He had a stable income, yes, but I had poured every penny of my savings, my inheritance from my parents, and a mountain of my own debt into getting Elysian off the ground. He hadn't risked a thing. This wasn't about fairness. This was a hostile takeover of my life. He had already taken my past, our shared history, and twisted it into a narrative of my failure. Now he was trying to steal my future. The legal threats escalated quickly. His lawyer was aggressive, filing motions, demanding access to our financials, sending daily emails filled with veiled threats and insulting settlement offers. He was trying to bleed me dry, to bury me in legal fees and paperwork until I gave up and gave him what he wanted. The pressure was immense. The company's board was getting nervous. The constant legal battle was a distraction we couldn't afford. We were in the middle of a crucial phase of R&D for a new product line, and my attention was being pulled away to deal with depositions and financial audits. Liam was poisoning the well, telling people in our financial circles that Elysian was unstable, that my leadership was compromised. He was trying to dismantle my reputation as methodically as he had dismantled my heart. I felt like I was fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against the ghost of the man I loved, and another against the monster he had become. And on both fronts I was losing. I hit rock bottom on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was in my office, buried under a mountain of legal documents. My lawyer had just called with bad news. Liam's legal team had filed an injunction to freeze Elysian's primary operating accounts, claiming I was misappropriating company funds. It was a lie, a blatant and malicious tactic to paralyze us, but the legal process to fight it would take weeks, maybe months. We had payroll to meet. We had suppliers to pay. This move could kill the company. I hung up the phone, and just stared at the wall. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window felt like it was counting down the seconds to my complete and utter ruin. He was going to win. This slick, charming monster I had shared a bed with for 2 decades was going to burn my world to the ground and dance on the ashes with his 28-year-old replacement. I felt a profound, bottomless despair. I had nothing left to fight with. My heart was broken, my confidence was shattered, and now my company, the one thing I had left, was on the verge of collapse. I put my head in my hands, and for the first time, I truly wept. Not the quiet, sad tears of the past few months, but racking, hopeless sobs. I had lost. I was old, I was unwanted, and now I was going to be poor. He had taken everything. The door to my office opened. It was Chloe. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked over, put a hand on my shoulder, and waited for the storm to pass. When my sobs finally subsided into ragged breaths, she pulled up a chair and looked me square in the eye. Her own eyes were fierce, angry on my behalf. "Okay," she said, her voice low and steady. "That's enough. You're done mourning. Now it's time to get angry." "What's the point, Chloe?" I whispered, my voice thick with defeat. "He's frozen the accounts. He's going to win. He has all the power." "Power." She scoffed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "Maya, he has a good lawyer and a fragile ego. That's not power. You have the power. You've just forgotten where you keep it." I just shook my head, unable to see a way out of the darkness. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "For weeks, you've been letting him define you. You've been looking at yourself through his eyes. The broken wife. The aging woman. You've been fighting him on his turf, emotion, sentiment, history. That's a game you'll always lose with a man like that. He rewrites history to suit his narrative." She tapped a stack of legal papers on my desk. "This is just noise. Financials, depositions, that's all he has. But what do you have?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. Her voice dropped, becoming sharp and clear, like a scalpel. "Stop looking at what he took, Maya. Look at what you've built. Elysian isn't just creams in a jar, it's cutting-edge science. It's data. It's biology. It's about understanding the very thing he's using as a weapon against you. Use it." Her words hung in the air. Use it. Something shifted inside me. It was like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for months. The fog of despair began to thin, replaced by a cold, clear light. She was right. I had been fighting like a wife, when I should have been fighting like a scientist. A scientist doesn't get emotional. A scientist observes, gathers data, forms a hypothesis, and executes a precise, controlled experiment. Liam's accusations, his legal claims, his new life with Amber, they weren't just personal attacks. They were data points. And Amber wasn't just the other woman. She was a variable. A beautiful, 28-year-old variable in a very interesting equation. A new kind of energy began to flow through me. It wasn't hope.
It was colder than that.
It was purpose. The tears stopped. I sat up straighter, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I looked at Chloe, and for the first time in a long time, she saw the old Maya looking back at her. "Get our tech guys," I said, my voice steady and devoid of its earlier tremor. "I need them to run a search through the new client database of all our subsidiary clinics. I'm looking for someone who signed up in the last 3 months. Someone who matches a specific physical description." Chloe's eyes widened as she began to understand. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "What's the hypothesis, doctor?" she asked. I looked out the window at the rain-streaked city. "My hypothesis," I said, a sliver of ice in my tone, "is that vanity is predictable. And insecurity is a pre-existing condition. The game had changed." He thought this was a divorce. I was about to turn it into a clinical trial. The despair was gone, replaced by a humming, focused energy. I was back in my element. The lab became my sanctuary and my war room. Chloe handled the lawyers, buying us time with strategic delays and countermotions, while I began my own investigation. I started not with the present, but with the past. I pulled years of financial records, cross-referencing company accounts with the personal ones Liam used to manage. I worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and a cold, simmering rage. I was no longer a grieving wife. I was a forensic accountant of my own life. It didn't take long to find the discrepancies. They were small at first, clever. An invoice for consulting services from a company that didn't exist. Inflated expense reports for business trips he never took. A series of payments to a boutique hotel just a few miles from our house. He had been building his escape hatch for years, funding his double life with my money, with Elysian's money. Each discovery was a fresh stab of betrayal, but it was also a piece of evidence. I documented everything with meticulous, dispassionate precision, creating a timeline of his deceit. The emotional pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with the sharp, satisfying clarity of a successful experiment. I was proving my hypothesis. He was a fraud. While I built my financial case against him, my tech team was working on the other half of the equation. 2 days after my request, I got an email from my head of IT. The subject line was simply flagged. Inside was a new client file from a high-end medi-spa in the city that we had recently acquired. The spa used our most advanced, non-invasive technologies, the kind of treatments favored by people who wanted to look naturally perfect. The new client's name was Amy Smith, but the photo on the file, a quick snapshot taken by the receptionist for their records, was unmistakable. It was Amber. My heart pounded in my chest as I read through her file. She had signed up for our most expensive package, the Timeless Radiance series. A 3-month course of treatments using our proprietary cellular regeneration technology to combat the earliest signs of aging. According to her intake form, her primary concerns were loss of vibrancy, fine lines around the eyes, and preventative care. It was all there. The language Liam had used against me, now being used by her in a desperate bid to keep him. And then I saw it. The digital signature on the client consent form. I clicked it open. She had signed a standard, multi-page document, the kind no one ever reads. It included clauses about potential side effects, payment terms, and, buried on page 7, a release allowing the company to use anonymized data, including photographs, for internal research, training, and marketing purposes. It was standard practice in the industry. It was legal. It was perfect. I had her. My plan began to form, elegant and brutal in its simplicity. I wouldn't use this information to blackmail him or expose her in a tawdry gossip column. That was his level. My victory would be clean, clinical, and utterly devastating. It would happen in the one place he felt most powerful, the negotiating table. I told my lawyer to agree to a final settlement meeting. I conceded on several minor points, making it look like I was weakening, that his strategy of financial strangulation was working. He wanted me desperate. I would give him the illusion of desperation. My only condition for the meeting was that Amber had to be there. I want her to see what she is helping him destroy, I told my lawyer to say, a touch of melodramatic flair to mask the real reason. Liam, arrogant and sure of his victory, readily agreed. He probably thought her presence would be the final twist of the knife, a beautiful, youthful reminder of everything I had lost. He had no idea he was bringing his own executioner to the gallows. The days leading up to the meeting were the calmest I'd felt in months. I had my data. I had my evidence. The outcome was already determined. All that was left was to observe the reaction. I slept soundly for the first time since he'd left. I went to the lab and worked on my real projects, the science that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. I was a scientist again. And on the morning of the meeting, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an old, discarded woman. I saw myself. I saw a woman who had built an empire, a woman who had been tested by fire and hadn't burned. I put on a simple, elegant navy blue dress, tied my hair back in a sleek, professional knot, and went to finish my experiment. The conference room was just as I had imagined it, cold, impersonal, all glass and steel. It smelled of expensive coffee and self-importance. Liam and his lawyer were already there, seated on one side of a long, polished mahogany table. Liam looked relaxed, confident. He gave me a small, pitying smile as I walked in. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like a predator who was about to enjoy his meal. Then Amber walked in. In person, she was even more striking than in her photos. Tall, blonde, dressed in a tight white dress that screamed money and youth. She avoided my gaze, looking bored and slightly annoyed to be there, as if this were all a tedious formality before she could get on with her fabulous life. She sat next to Liam, and he placed a proprietary hand on her knee. They were a perfect, gleaming power couple, and I was the drab, inconvenient past that needed to be erased. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, sat next to me and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. I gave a small nod back. We were ready. Liam's lawyer, a portly man named Henderson, began. He droned on about Liam's significant non-financial contributions and the emotional labor he had invested in my success. He presented their final offer. It was an insult. A fraction of what the company was worth, but enough to cripple us, and more than enough for Liam and Amber to live very, very well. It came with a gag order, of course. I was to sign away my company, and my voice in one fell swoop. When he finished, the room was silent. Everyone looked at me, expecting me to break, to argue, to cry. Liam leaned forward, his expression a mask of feigned sympathy. "Look, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a generous offer. It's more than you deserve, frankly. Let's just sign the papers, end this with some dignity, and all move on." I didn't look at him. I looked at Sarah. "Is the projector set up?" I asked, my voice calm and clear. Henderson frowned. "What projector? What is this?" "Just a small presentation," I said, pulling a USB stick from my bag. "I find that visuals often help clarify complex data." I walked to the head of the table and plugged the stick into the laptop connected to the large screen on the wall. A moment later, the Elysian logo appeared, crisp and white against a black background. Liam rolled his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips. Amber was texting under the table. "What is this, Maya?" Liam sighed, impatient. "A last-ditch sales pitch? It's a little late for that." "Not a sales pitch," I said, clicking to the next slide. "A case study." The title on the screen read, "Case Study Number 734, a study in accelerated cellular revitalization." Below it, two photos appeared side by side, labeled before and after. The photos were of a woman's cheek and the area around her eye, cropped and anonymized. The before image showed what any dermatologist would recognize: mild photoaging, decreased elasticity, the very first signs of crow's feet. The after image was dramatically different. The skin was luminous, firm, the fine lines virtually gone. "This is the result of a 3-month trial of our new TX for peptide serum," I explained, my voice taking on the familiar, confident tone of a scientist presenting her findings. The subject responded incredibly well. The formula stimulated collagen production by nearly 40% and increased cellular turnover at a rate we've previously only seen in clinical-grade retinoids, but with none of the irritation. "It's a genuine breakthrough." Liam scoffed loudly. "Nobody cares about your nerd stuff, Maya. Is this a joke? Are you trying to sell us face cream?" "I'm not selling anything," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "I'm just demonstrating the power of what I've built. The power of data." I looked over at Amber. She had finally stopped texting and was watching the screen with a flicker of interest. She was, after all, in the business of beauty. "This particular subject," I continued, my voice dropping slightly, "was very concerned with maintaining her youthful appearance. A desire to combat what she called a loss of vibrancy. Sound familiar, Liam?" His smile faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Henderson, his lawyer, was looking back and forth between us, sensing a shift in the room's dynamics. "So," I said, my fingers hovering over the mouse, "we were so thrilled with the results of this trial that we decided to feature it in our new client onboarding materials." I clicked to the final slide. And that's when he screamed. The slide was the "Welcome to the Elysian Family" email. Amber's name was at the top, in elegant script. And the before and after photos were no longer cropped and anonymous. They were her full-face clinical photographs. The ones taken at the spa. The before shot, taken under harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights, showed every tiny imperfection she had paid a fortune to erase. The after shot was the glowing, perfect woman sitting at the table. The silence that followed Liam's scream was a physical thing. It pressed in on my eardrums. Amber's face had gone completely white, her mouth a perfect O of horror. Her eyes darted from the screen to Liam and then to me. In them, I saw it all. The humiliation, the terror of being exposed, the realization that her greatest insecurity had just been projected onto a 10-foot screen. Liam was on his feet, his face purple with rage. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice a strangled whisper. "What is this?" "It's a case study, Liam," I said calmly, taking a sip of my water. "Your girlfriend was so impressed with my work that she became a client. She signed the consent forms and everything. She wanted to look young and vibrant for you. I suppose she should have read the fine print." Amber finally found her voice. It was a thin, reedy sound. "You can't do this." "Oh, but I can," I replied, my voice still even. "It's all perfectly legal. It's research. And the results, as you can see, are spectacular. You are a walking, talking advertisement for the genius of the woman your boyfriend is trying to destroy." The irony, so potent and so delicious, hung in the air between us. The entire foundation of Liam's argument for leaving me, my age, my lack of vibrancy, was a sham. His perfect, youthful trophy was secretly, desperately, using my science to hold back the tide of time. He hadn't upgraded. He had just found someone more insecure, someone who needed my help to live up to his impossible standards. Liam stared at the screen, then at Amber, then back at the screen. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, sputtering fury. He had been played. His narrative, the one where he was the vital, powerful man leaving his aging wife behind, had been utterly obliterated. He hadn't just been outsmarted, he had been rendered a complete and utter fool. His lawyer, Henderson, was pale, shuffling his papers, his blustering confidence completely gone. He knew, as well as I did, that the game was over. Amber let out a sob and grabbed her purse. "I can't," she stammered, stumbling out of her chair. She shot Liam a look of pure venom. "You told me she was nothing," she shrieked, before turning and fleeing the room. Liam was left standing there, alone, exposed under the glow of his mistress's before photos. He slowly sank back into his chair, his body deflating like a punctured balloon. He looked at me, and for a moment, the rage was gone, replaced by something else. A flicker of the man I used to know, looking at me with a dawning, horrified respect. He had come here to bury me, and I had handed him the shovel. I turned to his lawyer. "Now," I said, my voice like ice, "about that settlement offer. I believe we need to start again. From scratch. And this time, we'll be discussing the significant funds your client embezzled from my company. I have a presentation for that, too. It's very data-rich." Henderson just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He slowly, deliberately, closed his briefcase. Checkmate. The aftermath was swift and silent. There was no more fight in them. Liam's case, built on a foundation of lies and arrogance, crumbled into dust. The evidence of his financial fraud, combined with the psychological checkmate I had delivered in that conference room, left him with no leverage, no power, no ground to stand on. He signed everything I put in front of him. He walked away with nothing but his tailored suits and his public humiliation. I never saw him again. Amber, I heard, moved to the other side of the country a week later. Victory didn't feel the way I thought it would. It wasn't a jubilant, fist-pumping moment. It was a quiet, deep, and profound sense of relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted from my chest, allowing me to breathe fully for the first time in nearly a year. I didn't celebrate with champagne or a lavish party. I went back to my lab. I walked through the quiet, humming space that evening, the place where I had always felt most myself. I ran my hand over the cool stainless steel of a workbench. I inhaled the familiar, clean scent of my life's work. This was real. This was mine. It had never been his. He had been a guest in my world, not the architect of it. The pain of his betrayal was real, a scar I would always carry, but it no longer defined me. It was just a data point in a long and complex life. In the weeks that followed, a new energy surged through Elysian. Freed from the distraction and the financial drain of the legal battle, we moved forward with a speed and clarity we hadn't had in years. I poured myself into the work, not as an escape, but as a reclamation. The new product line, the one based on the TX4 peptide serum, was fast-tracked. Chloe and I worked side by side, a true partnership, rebuilding and strengthening what Liam had tried to tear down. One evening, Chloe found me in my office, sketching out a marketing concept for the new line. "What are we calling it?" she asked, leaning over my shoulder. I looked at the words I had written down. I wasn't interested in selling youth anymore. That felt hollow. I was interested in selling resilience.
Strength.
The beauty that comes not from never aging, but from living. "The Phoenix Collection," I said. Chloe smiled. "I like it. Rising from the ashes." "Exactly," I said. He tried to tell me my story was over. He didn't realize he was just writing the prologue to my next chapter. My life is quiet now, but it is not empty. It is full. It's full of challenges and breakthroughs, of late nights in the lab and early mornings watching the sunrise from my office window. It's full of the camaraderie of my team and the deep, abiding friendship with Chloe. I am 43 now. I have new lines around my eyes from laughing with her, and a few more strands of silver in my hair from the stress of running a global company. I look in the mirror, and I am not afraid of what I see. I see a woman who survived. A woman who discovered that her value was never tied to a man's approval or the date on her birth certificate. My value is in my mind, my resilience, my ability to create. Liam thought my age was my weakness. He was wrong. It's the source of my power. It's the archive of my knowledge, the proof of my endurance. It is the one thing he could never take from me. He tried to bury me, not knowing I was a seed. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.